Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for over a decade. He had seen every kind of emotion pass across that stage. Joy, excitement, nervousness, even the occasional disappointment. But in all his years of television, nothing had prepared him for what was about to happen on that quiet Monday afternoon in February 2024. The studio lights were bright, the audience was ready for another fun episode, and two families stood at their podiums with smiles on their faces. Everything seemed perfectly normal. What nobody knew was that within the next 15 minutes, Steve Harvey would completely lose his composure on national television. Not because of a funny answer or a silly mistake, but because of a story so heartbreaking, so filled with loss and resilience, that even the most experienced television host in America couldn't hold back his tears. If stories of strength in the face of tragedy touch your heart, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel right now. What this woman shares will change how you see everything. The Mitchell family from Nashville, Tennessee, stood on one side of the stage. There were 5 of them, all wearing matching purple shirts that seemed to glow under the studio lights. At the center of the family stood a 45-year-old woman named Grace Mitchell. She had a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the kind of smile that people learn to wear when they've been through something that words can't fully describe. Her family surrounded her protectively, her mother on one side, her sister on the other, her 2 teenage nieces completing the lineup. They had come to Family Feud for a reason that went far beyond winning money or being on television. They had come to honor someone who couldn't be there with them. 3 years ago, Grace Mitchell had everything. She was married to her high school sweetheart, a man named David who made her laugh every single day for 22 years of marriage. They had 3 beautiful children, twin boys named Marcus and Michael who were 17, and a daughter named Hope who was 14. Grace worked as a pediatric nurse at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital, spending her days caring for sick children and supporting their families through the most difficult times of their lives. David was a firefighter, a hero who ran into burning buildings while everyone else ran out. They lived in a modest house with a big backyard where the kids played basketball and David grilled burgers every Sunday. It was a simple life, but it was everything Grace had ever wanted. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday in March, just an ordinary evening that gave no warning of the devastation to come. David was on duty at the fire station. Grace was home with the kids, helping Hope with her homework while the twins played video games in the living room. At 9:47 p.m., Grace's phone rang. It was the fire chief. There had been a massive warehouse fire on the outskirts of town. The roof had collapsed. 3 firefighters were trapped inside. David was one of them. Grace drove to the scene in a blur, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the steering wheel. When she arrived, she saw the flames lighting up the night sky, the dozens of fire trucks and ambulances, the grim faces of the firefighters standing outside. She knew before anyone said a word. She knew from the way they looked at her. David didn't make it out. The funeral was the largest Nashville had seen in years. Hundreds of firefighters from across the state came to pay their respects. The governor attended. The mayor gave a speech, but Grace barely heard any of it. She sat in the front row with her 3 children, all of them in shock, none of them able to fully comprehend that David was gone. The man who had kissed Grace goodbye that morning, who had promised to bring home pizza for dinner, who had plans to take the boys to a basketball game that weekend, was never coming home again. Grace had to be strong for her children. She had to hold herself together because they needed her. So she pushed her grief down deep inside and focused on getting through each day, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time. But the tragedy wasn't over. 8 months after David's death, Grace received news that would bring her to her knees all over again. Her son Marcus, one of the twins, had been experiencing headaches and fatigue that everyone assumed was just stress from losing his father. When the symptoms got worse, Grace took him to the doctor. The diagnosis was devastating. Marcus had a rare and aggressive form of brain cancer. The doctors said he had maybe 6 months to live. Grace couldn't believe what she was hearing. How could this be happening? How could God take her husband and then threaten to take her son too? It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. It was more than any person should have to bear. Grace quit her job to care for Marcus full-time. She spent every moment she could with him, determined to fill whatever days he had left with love and laughter and memories. Michael, the other twin, struggled terribly. He and Marcus had never spent more than a few hours apart their entire lives. Watching his brother get sicker and weaker was destroying him from the inside out. Hope tried to be brave, but she was only 15 years old, just a child herself, too young to carry the weight that had been placed on her shoulders. The medical bills piled up. The savings ran out. Grace had to sell the house where her children had grown up, the house where David had grilled those Sunday burgers, the house that held every happy memory of their family life. Marcus fought hard for 14 months, 287 days longer than the doctors had predicted. Grace was holding his hand when he took his last breath. He was 18 years old. At his funeral, Grace stood at the podium and gave a eulogy that left everyone in tears. She talked about her son's courage, his humor, his determination to live every day to the fullest even when he knew his time was short. She talked about his dream of becoming a firefighter like his father, a dream he would never get to fulfill. And she talked about the love that connected them still, a love that death could not destroy. After the service, Grace went home to an empty room that used to hold her son, and she let herself fall apart completely for the first time since it all began. A year passed. Grace slowly began to rebuild her life. She went back to work at the hospital, finding purpose in caring for other families going through their own battles. Michael graduated high school and enrolled in the fire academy, determined to carry on his father's and brother's legacy. Hope started her senior year, stronger and more mature than any 17-year-old should have to be. Grace's mother and sister had been there every step of the way, holding the family together when Grace didn't have the strength to do it herself. It was her sister who suggested they apply for Family Feud. She thought it would be good for them to do something fun together, to laugh again, to make new memories. Grace wasn't sure she was ready, but she agreed to try. The Mitchell family arrived at the studio wearing purple shirts, Marcus's favorite color. Grace had his initials embroidered over her heart, a small tribute that she hoped would bring him with her in spirit. The opposing family was friendly and energetic, clearly there just to have fun. Grace tried to match their energy, tried to smile and laugh at Steve Harvey's jokes, tried to be present in the moment instead of drowning in memories. The game went well. The Mitchell family won the first 2 rounds, their teamwork and chemistry clearly showing. Steve noticed something special about them, the way they supported each other, the way Grace's family members kept touching her arm or squeezing her hand between questions. During a break in taping, Steve walked over to the Mitchell family to chat. He liked to connect with the families personally, to learn their stories and understand what brought them to his show. He asked Grace what the occasion was, why they had decided to come on Family Feud. Grace took a deep breath and looked at her family. They nodded encouragingly. She had decided before they came that if Steve asked, she would tell the truth. She wouldn't hide her pain or pretend that everything was fine. She would honor David and Marcus by sharing their story. "Mr. Harvey," Grace began, her voice steady but soft, "we're here to honor my husband David and my son Marcus. David was a firefighter. He died in the line of duty 3 years ago. And Marcus, my baby boy, he passed away from brain cancer a year and a half ago." He was only 18. The studio went completely silent. Steve's professional smile faded, replaced by an expression of genuine shock and compassion. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." Grace nodded, her eyes glistening but her composure intact. "Most people don't know. We don't talk about it much because it's hard to explain. Losing one person you love is devastating. Losing 2, it's something you can't really put into words." Steve asked Grace how she had survived it, how she had found the strength to keep going after losing both her husband and her son in such a short time. Grace thought for a moment before answering. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "There were days when I didn't want to get out of bed, days when I didn't see the point of anything, but I have 2 other children who need me. Michael and Hope lost their father and their brother too. They needed their mother to be strong, even when I didn't feel strong at all." She paused, gathering herself. "And I made a promise to Marcus before he died. He made me promise that I would keep living, that I would find joy again, that I wouldn't let grief steal the rest of my life. I'm trying to keep that promise." Steve Harvey was visibly struggling to maintain his composure. His eyes were wet, his voice thick with emotion. He asked Grace what Marcus was like, what she wanted people to know about her son. Grace's face lit up despite the tears that were now falling freely. "Marcus was sunshine," she said. "Even when he was sick, even when he knew he was dying, he found ways to make us laugh. He would crack jokes with his nurses, pull pranks on his brother, tell Hope that everything was going to be okay even though we all knew it wasn't. He had his father's courage. He wanted to be a firefighter, you know. He wanted to save people, just like David did." Her voice broke on her husband's name, but she kept going. "Before he died, Marcus told me he wasn't scared. He said he was going to see his dad, and that made him happy. He said they would both be watching over us from heaven." Steve Harvey completely lost it. The tears that had been building finally spilled over, and he made no attempt to hide them. He stepped away from his podium and walked directly to Grace, pulling her into a tight hug right there on the Family Feud stage. "I'm sorry," he kept saying into her shoulder. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I can't imagine, I just can't imagine." The audience was weeping. Grace's family was weeping. The camera operators, the producers, the stagehands, everyone in that studio was moved to tears by what they were witnessing. This wasn't television anymore. This was something far more real, far more sacred than any game show moment. When Steve finally pulled back, he looked at Grace with profound respect. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met," he said, his voice shaking. "To go through what you've been through and still be standing, still be smiling, still be here trying to make memories with your family. That takes a kind of strength that most people don't have. Your husband would be proud of you. Your son would be proud of you." Grace wiped her eyes and managed a small smile. "They're here with us," she said. "I feel them, especially today. I feel them cheering us on." Steve nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then he turned to the audience and cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen," Steve said, wiping his face with his hands, "I need to tell you something. In all my years of doing this show, I have met thousands of families. I have heard thousands of stories, but I have never ever met anyone like Grace Mitchell. This woman has been through hell. She lost her husband, a hero who died saving others. She lost her son, a brave young man who fought cancer with everything he had. And she's still here. She's still standing. She's still loving her family and keeping her promises and finding reasons to smile." He paused, collecting himself. "That's what strength looks like. That's what courage looks like. That's what love looks like. And I am honored to have her on this stage today." The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 full minutes. Grace stood there, surrounded by her mother, her sister, and her nieces, overwhelmed by the response. She had expected to come on a game show and maybe win some money. She hadn't expected this outpouring of love and support from complete strangers. When the applause finally died down, Steve announced that regardless of how the rest of the game went, he was personally going to make sure the Mitchell family received the maximum prize. The producers nodded their agreement. Some moments transcended the rules of the game, and this was one of them. The Mitchell family went on to play Fast Money, and Grace insisted on being one of the 2 players. She said she wanted to win it for Marcus, for David, for all the days they should have had together but didn't. Her mother played with her, and together they scored enough points to win the $20,000 prize. But what happened next was even more special. Steve announced that several sponsors had reached out during the taping break, moved by Grace's story, wanting to help. A local car dealership was donating a new vehicle to the family. A home builder was offering to help them find affordable housing. The firefighters' union was establishing a scholarship in David and Marcus's names. The episode aired a month later and immediately became one of the most talked-about moments in Family Feud history. Clips of Steve's emotional breakdown went viral within hours, shared millions of times across social media platforms. But it was Grace's words that resonated most deeply with viewers. Her description of Marcus as sunshine, her revelation about his final promise, her quiet strength in the face of unimaginable loss. These moments touch people in ways that entertainment rarely does. Letters poured into the Family Feud offices by the thousands. People shared their own stories of grief and loss, finding comfort in knowing they weren't alone. The response from the public went far beyond emotional support. A GoFundMe campaign started by viewers raised over $500,000 for the Mitchell family within the first week. Grace tried to refuse the money at first, saying she hadn't shared her story for financial gain. But her sister convinced her to accept it, arguing that people wanted to help, that allowing them to contribute was a gift she could give back. Grace eventually agreed to accept the funds, with the stipulation that a significant portion would go toward establishing a foundation in David and Marcus's names to support families of fallen firefighters and children battling cancer. The David and Marcus Mitchell Foundation was officially launched 6 months after the episode aired. Its mission was twofold: to provide financial assistance to families who had lost firefighters in the line of duty, and to support families dealing with pediatric cancer. Grace became the public face of the foundation, speaking at fundraisers, visiting hospitals, connecting with families who were walking the same painful path she had walked. She found that sharing her story, rather than diminishing her grief, actually helped her heal. Every family she helped, every child she visited, every firefighter widow she comforted, it all gave meaning to the losses she had suffered. Michael Mitchell graduated from the Fire Academy and joined the Nashville Fire Department, following in his father's footsteps. He was assigned to the same firehouse where David had worked, and his colleagues welcomed him as family. Michael kept a photo of his father and brother in his locker, looking at it before every shift, promising them that he would make them proud. His first year on the job, he helped save a family of 4 from a house fire. When the local news covered the story, Michael said that he felt his father and brother with him that night, guiding his hands, giving him courage. Grace watched the interview with tears streaming down her face, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. Hope Mitchell graduated high school as valedictorian of her class. Her graduation speech focused on loss, resilience, and the importance of cherishing every moment with the people you love. She talked about her father, who had taught her that courage meant doing the right thing even when you were scared. She talked about her brother, who had shown her that you could face death with grace and even humor. And she talked about her mother, who had demonstrated what it meant to keep going when everything inside you wanted to stop. The speech went viral, shared by grief counselors and therapists as an example of healthy coping and resilience. Hope enrolled in nursing school that fall, planning to become a pediatric oncology nurse like her mother had been. Steve Harvey stayed in close contact with the Mitchell family after the taping. He called Grace on the anniversary of David's death and on the anniversary of Marcus's death, just to check in, just to let her know she wasn't forgotten. He attended Michael's Fire Academy graduation and Hope's high school graduation. He became a regular donor to the Mitchell Foundation and used his platform to raise awareness about the challenges facing families of fallen first responders. In interviews, Steve often cited his encounter with Grace as one of the most profound experiences of his career. He said she had taught him more about strength and faith in 15 minutes than he had learned in years of his own life. 2 years after her Family Feud appearance, Grace published a book called Sunshine After the Storm, Finding Hope in the Darkest Valleys. The book chronicled her journey through grief. From the night she lost David to the morning she finally felt ready to embrace life again. She wrote about the guilt she felt for surviving when her husband and son had not. She wrote about the anger she felt toward a God who had allowed such tragedy. She wrote about the slow, painful process of learning to live with loss rather than being destroyed by it. The book became a bestseller and was praised by grief counselors, religious leaders, and mental health professionals as a powerful resource for anyone navigating profound loss. Grace remarried 5 years after David's death. His name was Thomas, a widower himself who had lost his wife to breast cancer. They met at a grief support group and bonded over their shared understanding of loss. Grace was hesitant at first, worried that moving forward meant betraying David's memory. But her mother reminded her of the promise she had made to Marcus, the promise to keep living, to find joy again, to not let grief steal the rest of her life. Thomas understood. He had his own late wife to honor, his own memories to keep sacred. Together, they built a new life that made room for all the people they had loved and lost. The Mitchell Foundation grew into one of the most respected charities in Tennessee. By its 5th anniversary, it had provided over $3 million in assistance to families of fallen firefighters and children with cancer. Grace traveled the country speaking about resilience, grief, and finding purpose in pain. She visited fire stations and hospitals, always wearing purple, always carrying photos of David and Marcus, always sharing their story with anyone who needed to hear that survival was possible even after the worst kind of loss. She often said that David and Marcus had given her a mission. Her job now was to be their hands and feet in the world, to help others the way she wished someone could have helped her. On the 10th anniversary of David's death, the Nashville Fire Department dedicated a new training facility in his name. Grace stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by her family, old and new. Michael was there in his firefighter uniform, now a lieutenant himself. Hope was there with her husband and their newborn daughter, named Grace after her grandmother. Thomas stood beside Grace, his hand in hers, proud of the woman she had become. And somewhere Grace believed David and Marcus were watching too, their spirits present in the Tennessee sunshine, their love surrounding their family as it always had and always would. Grace gave a speech at the dedication ceremony that was later shared millions of times. She talked about the worst night of her life, the night the fire chief called, the night her world ended. She talked about the months that followed, the second blow of Marcus's diagnosis, the feeling that God had abandoned her completely. And then she talked about the slow climb back toward light, the discovery that grief could coexist with joy, that honoring the dead meant living fully for them. David ran into burning buildings to save strangers, she said. Marcus faced death with a smile on his face. They were the bravest people I ever knew, and they taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to keep going even when you're terrified, even when you can't see the way forward, even when every part of you wants to give up. That's what they would want for all of us, not just to survive, but to live. Steve Harvey watched a recording of the dedication ceremony in his office. He cried through the whole thing, just as he had cried on that Family Feud stage years ago. But these were different tears. Not just tears of sorrow, but tears of admiration, of hope, of profound respect for a woman who had turned the worst kind of tragedy into a force for good in the world. He called Grace that evening to tell her how proud he was of her. Grace thanked him and said something he would never forget. "You gave me a platform that day, Steve. You let me share my story with millions of people. Because of that, I've been able to help thousands of families. David and Marcus are still saving lives through me. That's their legacy, and you helped make it possible." The story of Grace Mitchell and her appearance on Family Feud remains one of the most powerful moments in television history. It proved that a game show could be more than entertainment. It could be a platform for truth, for healing, for the kind of raw human connection that changes lives. Grace still wears purple every day. She still carries photos of David and Marcus everywhere she goes. And she still keeps the promise she made to her dying son, to live fully, to love deeply, and to never let grief have the final word. Her sunshine keeps shining, even through the darkest clouds. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear Grace's message today. Her words remind us all that loss doesn't have to destroy us. It can transform us into something stronger, something kinder, something that honors the people we've loved and lost by bringing light into the world. Thank you for watching, and remember, the people who love us never truly leave us. They become part of who we are, guiding us forward even when we can't see the path. Keep living, keep loving, keep honoring your sunshine.